gaslighting, as telling you that what you believe is true is not true and making you feel as if it's your fault for dealing with this, is a major concern in her research, which she mentioned in K through 12. So let's say that that thing happens exactly the way that you wanted it to, that you got your kids out of that system, that you have them educated by Black people according to the tenets of Africology, and then they go to college. So by college, they should be firm in their ideologies, you would hope. But if they're using any materials that are even sponsored by predominantly white institution-oriented organizations, then they very likely have a Eurocentric worldview attached to them that will continue that ontological manipulation. The problem with the K through 12 piece is not so much that the content is going to tell them that they are bossy. If they're bad, they are articulate. If they are good, but it's really telling them how to treat text as ultimate truth. That because it is on this piece of paper, because it's on this sign, it's on this book, then it must be objectively firm. And what we are putting forth in our combination research, and in my piece that continues on looking at undergraduate textbooks, is that something can be epistemically objective, meaning that it is true according to what the book says, but it can be at that same moment ontologically subjective, meaning that it is up to the worldview of the person who it is serving to present it in this way. So the project began with just a textual analysis of textbooks. Started my review with a little bit about the textbook industry itself, and as we are educators on the panel, we know that the textbook industry is second only to those pharmaceutical representatives in the aggression that they use to make sure that you adopt these particular texts, especially those of us who aren't exclusively in Africana studies and are teaching other disciplines as well. So they are pressing the 5 big publishers to make sure that you adopt this textbook for your use. I teach speech communication, and I have hundreds of desk copies of books that have just almost even the same pagination, exactly the same content, and things that are supposed to be treated as objective because the children from K through 12 have been taught if it's in this book, it is automatically firm and true. And those things will contain lots of subjectivity. So I took 6 textbooks just off of a shelf in our library that were desk copies that are available for student use. 3 from my own discipline, which is speech communication, and 3 from psychology. The texts were for intercultural communication, interpersonal communication, and for social psychology. And in each one of the textbooks, we picked a couple of chapters on prejudice, aggression, and nonverbal communication because those had the most availability for cultural conversations that would be delivered to all students, supposedly objectively, according to the epistemic portion of it. So the first that we looked at took a communication chart about in-group and out-group status, and they had information that was largely stereotypical. Asians perform this way, African American people perform this way. This is how Latinos perform happiness and or shame. And there's one group that was left off of the list. There were no white people on the list whatsoever. So if white people aren't on the list, then they must be the invisible automatic default that all cultures are performing to, or the gaze that they're performing within. So that is automatically a level of violence in telling you that you are out, you are other than, and this must be the default. So a student that had not been encultured in Africology would experience that as violence. Then we look at a couple of textbooks that were in social psychology, and those were perhaps more alarming because they were encroached in chapters that were supposed to explain the nature of prejudice and explain the concept of what gets an aggressive personality. In the prejudice chapter, the images were far more alarming than the text itself. You all understand how textbooks will have a pop culture picture to demonstrate whatever subject it is that they are trying to define. One of them shows the progress in prejudice by showing George Wallace standing in front of the door and not letting the African American students integrate the university as federally mandated. And then it's split with another photo of him shaking the hand of the homecoming queen 10 years later. Wow, what progress. So he went from using and abusing his power of his position to fundamentally disbar citizens from their right that has been given by their birth, to now being seen shaking the hand of a Black woman, as if both of those things cannot exist at the same time, and they did not exist at the same time. So that is upending both what students who would be versed in Africology would know to be true, and also would be indoctrinating students that had not received that undergird to believe this is normal. I'm supposed to believe if I see this white man shake this black woman's hand, there's no way that he could be a bigot anymore. He must be reformed. And more than that, there in the chapter about aggression, we see photos that illustrate the themes that will cause people, or that will even just correlate without necessarily being a causative, the concept of aggression to manifest in a groupthink level. And one of those levels of arousals that was cited was hot weather. And this is the one that Ms. Lawson's already laughing at because I cannot stop talking about it. It was so alarming. And so we're supposed to be in the chapter on aggression, and it is saying to us that heat causes aggression. And the photo that is used for the 2017 edition of the textbook that is used at my institution right now is of the uprising following the murder of Michael Brown. And it says in its caption, hot weather in the summer months can spur looting and rioting. I read every single piece of that chapter, and there is not one mention of the murder, not one mention of no charge, not one mention of it being an uprising, not one mention of the context whatsoever. Just as if black people standing in the street got hot enough to begin looting, and that was that. So I thought, and I spoke to Ms. Lawson about it, if that's the 2017 edition, even though it wasn't part of the original program, what must the 2014 edition say, or what was this 2013, which picture would they use for that? So of course they use a picture of the 1992 LA uprising, and it says in the caption, just about the same form, it mentions that looting and rioting happens more often in the hot summer months. And it says the caption is from Los Angeles, 1992, the end of April and the beginning of May. So that good old Farmer's Almanac lets us know in 1992, firstly, technical summer is in June, not in April or May. And we also know that it did not surpass 75 degrees during that time. So what we're mentioning about ontological manipulation and violence is not that the Eurocentric white supremacy ordained worldview will come into textbooks accidentally based on the worldview of the authors and their subjectivity, but that is purposely put forth as a lie. There is no reason to use that image. It was not of value to the students to understand in one sentence that it is summer and also the month of May, as if those two things are congruent in ontological truth. So we want to invite you guys at the Q&A to talk a little bit about where you see this level of ontological manipulation, and maybe establishing a body or some assistance for a piece of Africology to look at these texts and say, this is not cool to be in a classroom, okay, or we need to do something to make sure that we stamp it and say this level is violent. So that's what we're putting forth, that from the time that they enter at age 3 in pre-K until the time that they feel like they've made it out of the danger zone, they're still in danger of the level of ontological violence that's put into our educational materials.
Great. Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Great.